Hey everyone, welcome to my studio. Have you ever had a painting when you've been painting and you just don't know if you're finished or not? I think this is a problem or an issue that we all face. How do we know when we're done? So what I want to do is talk about that today, and I'm going to show you an old painting that I thought was finished. And this time I'm going to approach it with fresh eyes, maybe eyes of maybe a more mature painter. I've been painting for what, since 2005. Yeah, 15 years now. So this painting that I'm going to work on was probably done 10 years ago, and I promise you I thought I was done, but now I can look at it and say, there's some things that I can do. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to look at this painting with you guys, and I'm going to talk about the things that I'm going to change that I think I could do better. I'm going to make those changes and hopefully turn it into a more finished painting. We'll see how it goes. What I want to encourage you to do, though, is stick with me till the end, because I've had some comments from some of you who said, gosh, I thought it wasn't going to turn out, like it was looking terrible, but you really pulled it together. So if you find yourself in that camp and you've seen my videos and you think, oh no, she's never going to do anything with that, stick with me to the end. Most of the time they come out, and you'll learn something along the way. So stick with me till the end, and be sure to give me a like, subscribe to this channel, and of course, if you want to know when a new video is posted, be sure to click on that bell, that notification bell, and so that way you'll be notified. All right, let's get started. So here is the painting that I did probably 10 years ago, and it's large for when I first started painting. I only painted small 5x7 small paintings, so I'm sure that I intended for this to be a finished masterpiece. I was very enamored with this field of Queen Anne's lace and clover, and I've painted it many times. In fact, if you followed me, you've probably seen various iterations of this same scene. And I usually include the Queen Anne's lace, but for this one I thought, why not just make it about the clover? But now that I'm looking at it, I see some things that I think I could do a better job with. And number one that is bothering me, I do enjoy the color palette. I will say I like the softness, I like the color harmony, I like how the pink in the sky kind of relates to the pink clovers. But what I find kind of disturbing is the size and the placement of these flowers. I feel as though they are too tall for clover, like they're clover on steroids. Like they shouldn't be like tall waving, you know, even if I had a low viewpoint. So I feel that this is off. And also, if I look at the placement of the flowers, okay, look at these guys. They're the exact same, these three, the exact same size. These guys are twins. Look at how they're just kind of lined up together. That's not very interesting composition. And then what's going on over here? Look at this big, pretty empty area in the middle of the painting. And then we have this one lone guy over here. So I'm not sure that it's the strongest composition. What else is going on here? All right, my grass marks. Okay, 10 years ago, I was not very painterly or expressive with my grass marks. Notice how they're all fairly thick, and they're all pretty much the same shape and size. Even the spacing isn't very interesting. You can see I tried to mix it up a little bit, but look how thick and just this area right in here, these grasses, I could do a better job, I think, with those grasses. I like that I was bold and put little spots of color. I could see that I was progressing in that area of not being afraid to make marks and leave them alone like that. I do feel that I created good depth. I mean, by having this kind of blue hazy mountain and some cooler colors in the distance. And some warmer, brighter colors here in the foreground. So those things are working. I do like the sky. I like it's kind of a fractured sky. I think that's when I started to explore that option. So those are the things I like. Those are the things that I don't like. Now let's get to work and do some adjusting. So I'm going to take a stiff brush, and the first thing I'm going to do is brush out the offenders. These tall guys, I think they're too tall. These other ones that are in here I think are fine. Now I want to brush out these tall grasses, but I'm using a smaller brush because I like the color in the sky, so I don't really want to this. Look how thick this is. This has got to go. And some of these grasses. We can cover these up. All right, now that I've brushed out, and I have a tray on my easel here that collects the dust, so some of the dust did fall, but I'm using the board straight up so it falls straight down into the tray rather than, and pastel dust, just for your information, is heavy. It doesn't really go in the air unless you blow on it. It's heavy so it falls down. So you don't have to really worry that you're breathing it in. You're really not. That's Heidi. For those of you who don't know, she's making commentary, and sometimes she does do that. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Blair Very Low Odor Workable Fixative, and I'm going to give everything a quick spray. Why? I do want to darken this area, and I also want to get a little bit more texture in the grasses. So by spraying with Workable Fixative, I'm going to get a little bit more layers. Let's see what paper I'm using. I'm going to just pull it off the hinges. I feel like from the weight of this paper that it's probably Wallis. It's white Wallis because I can see I toned it pink. So it's fairly thick. And the white paper I started using because I felt like it made the pastel a little more luminous. So I do like working on white paper, but I usually tone it so that it's not all these little bits would be white bits, and I think that would be distracting. All right, let's now get to work. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to establish the composition, and I think I'm using this reference photo, and I'm going to turn these clovers into Queen Anne's lace because I think that fits the scene a little bit better. So this will be a little guy over here, and then we'll have a guy over here going in this direction. I do like this guy. Let's make him go in this direction. I'm using a Nupastel to do this, to draw these in, a hard pastel. Remember, we had this big empty area, so what does this need? It needs a couple of little things. Again, I want to vary the shapes and the sizes. Let's have another Queen Anne's lace kind of hiding down in here. What I want you to do is kind of move through the painting like so. I want there to be a rhythm to the placement of the flowers. So the flower placement is not random. I have learned this, though, over the years. I used to, obviously you can see from this 10-year-old painting, I had very random placement. All right, so hopefully that's going to be better. Now, I am going to block in these flowers, and I'm going to start let's start with a darker green. I'm going to have to work at removing the lines that I put in here, but I really made them a little bit darker and bolder so that you guys could see them. So I'm going to block in these shapes with a dark, cool green. And by the way, I'm using Terry Ludwig pastels, and this is my set that I selected of, they call it the Floral Landscape Set. I'm going to choose a dull violet, a grayed down violet, to add a little bit more interest to those flower shapes. One thing that I need to keep in mind is that I can't have them all floating at the top, so I'm going to end up covering some of them up, but I have to put them in first. Put them in, then cover them up. I'm going to add a little bit of green. So with these flowers, I start with the darkest color that I see or that I want to have in them, and then I gradually get them lighter. Now all of this other stuff that was in the original painting, I'm going to leave because I like the way the little pink is peeking through. But in the areas where I can see the paper, I'm taking my finger and just very lightly tapping so that I can get some of those spotty areas out. Just very softly, just to unify this a little bit better. I like some of them, but there was a little bit too much going on. All right. Now we've got these flowers established. What I'm going to do is work from the top down or the back forward and kind of redo the grasses, and then I'll come and adjust the flowers. So let's start with the sky. And what I need to do for the sky that's not the right pink in that set. So I'm going to just use a pink hard pastel. Hard pastels are great to use as a blending tool anyway, so I'm using this pink hard pastel to come in and just kind of redo this messy area, basically, where I had to get rid of the clover. I'm cutting in with the sky color, you can see, so I can get a lacier feeling to my Queen Anne's lace. There is also some very, very pale yellow up in the sky, so I do have that in my set. So I'll add that right now. And so there, oops, I have restored the sky. Now, what about the, this could be a little smoother. The mountain. I really like the color that I selected for the mountain. I like that it's kind of in the distance. It's not jumping forward. So I have this wonderful gray down blue violet, and I'm just going to reestablish the mountain. These are tree covered mountains, so I'm not having a sharp edge, right? I just want it to look like the trees in the distance. I see I have a mess right in here, but I need to tap it out. Let's use the pink. Get rid of it a little bit. All right, now working my way down. I like the color that I used for the distant green, so I'm going to find one that was similar and just reestablish it where it kind of is getting lost. This is a dull gray down green, so kind of a neutral green, so it works well for distant grasses. I want to create a feeling of depth, so like the meadow goes way back there to the mountains. Here's another cooler, grayer, duller green. I'll use that in the distance. But as I come forward, I can start to use darker values. So here's a darker green, and this will allow some of these flowers to have a little backdrop so that they can really pop. I can also use the typical grassy green just to connect the background with the foreground. Let's pull some of this up in here. And I'm also starting to cover up the flower shape slightly, the Queen Anne's lace. But I covered it up a little too much. Let's put it back in there, because remember what happened with the original painting was this empty area. So I don't really want to cover it up, that area, too much. All right, let's add some warmer greens, so some more of the yellow greens in this foreground area. It's time for another quick spray of fixative. Oops. Just keep the can moving or else you get blobs. Sometimes I like to press the nozzle halfway and then I get splatters. And gosh, if that were a finished painting, I would have a panic attack because, oh my gosh, splatters. But I actually like splatters because in this case it gives a little bit of interest and texture to this field. All right, now let's work on the flowers themselves a little bit more. We're going to get a little bit lighter green. I call this part turning on the lights. And you can start to see them emerge from the darkness. But again, I have to remind myself that let's just stick a few that are way in the distance. So I'm going to just make some linear marks to suggest a profusion of Queen Anne's lace. So those are smaller, flatter, they would be in the distance. Okay, what else? Let's add a little bit of, you see how now the pastel is skipping over the background? That's because of the Workable Fixative is doing its job. All right, now I have totally lost my clovers, and I really liked all of those clovers. So I'm going to put them back in, and I'm just using heavier marks. So I feel like the clovers that I originally had, here's one original, very fussy, right? Too much going on. So let's simplify that by just making marks. I like that some of those clovers were darker, kind of on their way out. So I'll put in some darker marks to suggest some of the spent blossoms. Also, I liked that there was a profusion of those clovers in the distance. Let's see if we can't hint at them by putting in some marks of a lighter pink. Just dot the distance, just to suggest that way back there, there's still a lot of clovers. Just a few little pink marks. All right. Oh, just because I have that pink in my hand, why not put some in my blossoms and my Queen Anne's lace, just to move the color around. All right, let's get them lighter. Add some lighter values. Here's a pale peach. And let's add another one over here. Lots of times when I'm doing this, my brain says, what if you add one right here? And usually, I may not know why, but I'll listen to myself, put it in, and then see how it is. Because it might be an intuitive mark that actually works. So I try to listen to myself sometimes. What about over here? I feel like maybe we need a guy hiding in the shadows. And if he's hiding in the shadows, he's not getting as much light. So let's tone him down and add some of that blue-violet. Maybe another one hiding right in here with a little blue-violet. All right, so next part is they need stems, and I need grasses. If you recall the earlier version, the grasses were stiff. They looked a little too contrived, kind of fake. Let's see, I want to get a dark green. This might be the dark blue. Yeah, let's try this one. And what I'm going to do, here we go, I'm going to create those little delicate parts of the flower, and I'm going to create a stem, but I'm going to make a broken line. So instead of those heavy marks that were in the previous grasses, I'm just letting the pastel kind of dance along the paper. This is a dark green. Just let it dance, so that way it won't be so kind of fake looking, kind of I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Not fake. Well, like balloons. Not like delicate flowers blowing in the wind. So we'll pull some up higher because that helps establish our point of view. But again, I don't want to get too carried away because a lot of times you put in one and one looks good and then you just keep going and then it's too much. All right. Now, let's add a little bit of brighter green to the sides of those stems to suggest just light. It's not bright sunlight because the sky is kind of, you know, that dull pink. It's really not the time of day where you have bright sunlight. But I want to hint at just a little bit of light just to brighten it up a little bit more. I'm using a hard pastel and I'm making a combination of dancing linear marks. And then I'm occasionally pressing hard to just give some different type of leaf shapes, just to suggest the complexity of this grassy area. I picked up another shade of green and continue to dance along with my marks. And again, I could get carried away with these grass marks. What I recommend when you get to this stage in your painting that you take time to step back and look and see if you have too many marks. Is it getting too busy? Stop before you go too far. So I'm going to stop At that point, now, here's what I want to do. I want to really turn on the lights, so I'm going to press really hard with an even lighter value, pale, I think this is a pale yellow, but it looks almost white. So I'm going to just hit the flower with a few petal marks in a few places. And the idea is I want to move your eye around the painting, so I have some detail in each part of the flower, not the entire flower. Just a little bit. And then sometimes there's these little, in the meadow, there's these little white flowers. So I'm going to just put a few dots just to give sparkle. And how are we on time? I wanted this to be about 20 minutes. Okay, so I need to clean up this area right here. You see I got a little bit messy with my, actually that was the other flower underneath. I gotta hold this. So I just want to clean this up with some sky color and then soften it with my finger. It just looked a little messy right there. And then sometimes, and I'll do it just for fun today, it's nice if in a meadow you have a little bit of life going on. So I think I'm going to add a little bumblebee. I know that sometimes it looks a little cliche, you know, and the more people who do it, then it just looks like, oh, everybody does that. But it's still fun and I want to do it. So I'm going to add a little bee. I have a photograph of a bee down here just to guide me. Where do you think he needs to go? So if your eye is going kind of like this, wouldn't it be nice in this area right here? So I'm going to have him approaching the flower. So I'm going to start with a dark, this is a Terry Ludwig dark. And then I'm going to pop in the yellow. And these are just very, very heavy marks. I'm just pressing very hard. Then he needs wings, and they look like they're kind of a golden yellow wing. And I could come back with a hard pastel if I want to, you know, just kind of define him. Oops, I know my arm's in the way. Define him a little bit, give a little bit of definition to the wing, and then here, the final little mark, a little pop of bright blue. It's hard to get a little mark with the fat pastel, but a little bit of bright blue rather, kind of brings it to life. Finally, I have these two dark things. The first thing that I see are these dark spots. So I just want to soften them slightly. I could add a little bit more detail to the clover just to say, hey guys, this is clover. If I add a few marks on a few of them, hopefully your eye fills in the rest so that I don't have to have them to be very fussy. So, one other thing. I am going to do one more thing, then I'm done. This flower seems a little heavy. It should have a little bit of laciness, so I'm going to take that background mountain color and just make a few marks just to open it up a little bit. So, there we have it. I think that this looks like a painting that I would do in 2020 versus 2010. And that is what happens when you practice every day. You start to see things that you can do to make a better painting. So I hope this has been helpful, giving you some good ideas. Don't throw out your paintings even if you don't like them. Come back to them in 10 years or less, and you will be so surprised at how much you have learned and what you can do to make them better. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. I do want to share with you, if you like this, if you like my demos, we have so much more on our Patreon group. So the link is in the description there, and it will be, and I'll put it in the video. I'd love for you to join us. We have so much fun, and I'll see you there.